Story time about how I got my sister's boyfriend to fall in love with me, and I do not regret it. Disclaimers, not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My sister and I have always been rivals since we were kids. I'm 22 and she's 24. We were always super close in age, which means we competed for everything, including our parents' attention, clothes and makeup, and somehow we always ended up liking the same boys. When I turned 16, she was going away for college, and I actually started to appreciate her a lot more. We started calling each other every single day, and I realized that I really missed my sister. We actually got closer living further away than together. My parents were also really happy with this because her and I would not get along when she lived at home. One weekend I decided to go stay with her on her campus, and that's when things got interesting. My sister was living it up. She was partying all the time. I told her that I didn't really like that she was partying so much. I told her that I didn't feel comfortable with her passing out at random guys' places. She told me that I was overreacting and not to tell my parents. But I got home and told my parents everything. This is when our relationship became bad once again. After this, my sister didn't trust me, and basically she became my enemy. She started criticizing everything about me, the clothes that I'd wear, so I had to distance myself from her. My parents wanted her to move back in with us because she wasn't doing well in school. She was clearly partying instead of studying. Of course, my sister refused to move back home, so my parents basically cut her off. I got a new boyfriend at this time, and my sister would flirt with him anytime she came home. I even caught them hugging one time. Part 2 is story time about how I stole my sister's boyfriend and don't regret it. Disclaimers, not my story time. Send me on Instagram. When I walked in on my boyfriend and my sister hugging, I knew I had to do something. I went straight to my parents and told them what she was doing. My dad pulled her into her room and talked to her, but she totally denied everything. She said that she was not flirting with my boyfriend, but we all knew that was a lie. Even my boyfriend was honest with me and told me that she had been flirting with him openly. That's when my boyfriend told me he didn't even want to come over to our house because my sister made him that uncomfortable. And when I told my parents this, they felt so embarrassed. They called my boyfriend and personally apologized to him. He was actually so sweet though. He would come visit me to my house and we would just chill out in his car while my sister was inside watching us through the window. Yeah, she was crazy. He and I eventually broke up because he went off to live in another country. And guess what? My sister said that she knew he never loved me and that's why he left me. She was being so mean at the time. A few years later, she started dating someone. Of course, at the time, it never occurred to me to even flirt with him or act the way that she did with my boyfriend. You see, I'm above all that. But as soon as I got a new boyfriend, she would start flirting with him. And she had no shame about it. This became a running problem in my family. My parents would ask her to leave me alone and my boyfriends, and she would say that she did. But no, she didn't. Oh yeah, and her boyfriend broke up with her because he noticed that she would flirt with a lot of guys. Apparently, she did it even in front of him. So when she finally got a new boyfriend, I decided that I was gonna do the same thing to her. I started flirting with her boyfriend a little. Not a lot, but I definitely made sure to tell him I thought he was attractive. After a few weeks, he started saying things back to me, and I knew that it was working. I never did it in front of my sisters and my parents because I didn't want them to get mad at me. So instead, I got her boyfriend to basically fall in love with me. I already knew everything about him because my sister would tell me, so I just started telling him I liked the same things he did. It got to the point where one day he kissed me and I didn't tell my parents. I made sure to get his hopes up. Part 3 is up. Once I got my sister's boyfriend to fall in love with me, her life turned to misery. No, I didn't regret it. Disclaimers, not my story time. Send me on Instagram. One day I went up to my sister and told her that her boyfriend had kissed me. First she thought I was making it up to make her jealous. Told me I could never compete with her and that she was the more beautiful sister out of the two of us. Which is wrong. So I handed her my phone so that she could see all the messages that her boyfriend and I had been sending each other. And that's when she lost it. She started wailing on me. She started slapping and kicking me. My parents ran into her room and asked her what was wrong. I told my parents that I treated my sister the way she treated me. She would always go after my boyfriends, flirt with them, and try to get them to break up with me. Of course, my parents didn't agree with me, so they were really angry. They separated us, but my sister went crazy. She called her boyfriend and told him to come over. Obviously, he didn't know that she already knew at the time. And when he came over, she started beating him up. He grabbed a pan from the kitchen and started swinging at him. She actually ended up giving him a concussion. After that, she begged for his forgiveness, but he still broke up with her. At the end of the day, he ended up leaving her. She was so stupid for begging him to stay with her. Her boyfriend even asked me if we could be together, and I told him no. I told him that the whole time I had just been playing him just to get back at my sister, which I know is so cruel, but he deserved it. After that, my sister and I decided to make peace. She told me that she wouldn't mess with my boyfriends anymore and that she would stop being evil. But after a month of having my new boyfriend, I found her flirting with him too. I told her if she didn't stop that I would make her life miserable once again. I'm pretty sure she has a boyfriend, but she doesn't want to tell my family. Cause she knows that I'll go after him and I would probably end up making him fall in love with me too. But at this point, I just don't know what to do. What should I do? She's so evil and I want to make her life miserable. Bye.
Am I the asshole for hiding the soda? I feel ridiculous for even posting this, but I need objective eyes on this. Background: 1 husband, 2 stepkids, 15 male, 17 male. Married 5 years. We keep separate financial accounts if that makes a difference, and we alternate who buys groceries week to week. Anyways, here's the deal. I don't drink coffee. I drink Mountain Dew or the occasional energy drink for my morning caffeine kick. My husband and the oldest stepson are both coffee drinkers. With increasing frequency, I'll go to grab a drink out of the fridge and all of the soda and energy drinks are gone. The kids have taken to coming home and grabbing 2 to 3 or more sodas, and before they left for their mom's house last week, the 15-year-old was actually packing a 6-pack into his backpack to go. The obvious solution, I thought, was to buy more soda. Yes, I know it's awful for the kids, but if their dad isn't stopping them from sucking down junk food, it's not my deal to intervene. Good point for you. Yes, you are correct. Nope, still gone to where I look for the fridge for one single much needed energy boost and nada. So I started asking my husband to pick up soda or a few energy drinks on his grocery shopping week to supplement. His response was that he's not wasting money on garbage like that and to complain about how expensive things like Mountain Dew are these days. Then tell your kids to stop drinking hers. Simple. Like, okay, you don't buy it, fine, don't buy it, but tell your kids not to take your wife's shit. Next tactic was to ask that if the kids drink the soda that they please leave a few behind if it's obvious we're almost out, so I have at least 1 or 2 when I go to grab one. This is where things took a turn for the worse. My husband got irritated and said that I was policing the food and that no one who lives here should have to ask permission to eat or drink. Really, dude? You gonna pull that shit? Ugh. Fine. I figured if I wanted to have a Mountain Dew or energy drink for myself, I would just put a little mini fridge in my office and stash a few in there. I got a tiny fridge that holds a 6-pack and pops a few in there. I put the cases I buy in my office and put a week's worth in the main fridge at a time so they last until I shop again. Okay, so you're putting some like 6 in your own little fridge and you're still putting a pack in the big fridge. Yesterday, the 15-year-old complained that there hadn't been Mountain Dew in the fridge for a few days, and my husband grumpily said, "Go get them from your stepmom's office. She's hiding food and snacks from you guys in there." What a piece of shit. At this point, I put my foot down and said I'm hanging on to some of the drink that I like every week because otherwise I don't get any. And if everyone else drank what I put in the fridge for them before I shopped again and my husband didn't want to buy any himself, that's just too bad. My husband still refuses to buy the soda himself, but is convinced I'm being a complete and total jerk because I'm hiding what I purchase. Am I being completely oblivious to my own asshole behavior here, or is this as lopsided as I think it is? Nah, your husband's psycho. What the heck? He's not wasting money on garbage, but he's perfectly happy for you to spend your money and not even drink your own soda. So, nah, get out of here.
Am I the asshole? I had my mother-in-law trespassed after she entered my home and fired my babysitter. I lost my wife, Anne, 34, just minutes after she gave birth to our first baby, Sammy. She had a difficult pregnancy, so I took an indefinite leave 3 months before she was due. Sammy's 4 months old now, and before I went back to work, I told my mother-in-law, Sandra, 56, about my plans and if she can recommend a nanny to take care of my daughter when I work. She offered to do it, nanny, that is, for free. I told her she's free to come by anytime during the day if she feels uncomfortable with a nanny looking after Sammy, but she insisted on doing it herself. So I said yes and gave her a copy of the house keys. Everything was fine for the first couple of weeks until I noticed that Sammy's not feeding as much. I asked Sandra about it and why Sammy's not feeding well. She said she's trying to breastfeed my daughter.
Wait, what? Mother-in-law?
Yeah. At first, I thought she was joking. Then I realized she wasn't. She said Sammy needs to latch for a few minutes every day to activate her milk production. I almost lost it. I told her she cannot do that, and she needs to stop. She said she will, but I caught her again when I walked in my daughter's room and she was forcing Sammy to latch. I confronted her and told her she's no longer my baby's nanny. I didn't ask for the key back as she's still welcome to come visit anytime. I asked for a 1-week leave from work to care for my daughter and find a nanny. I found one, but 2 days after, she never returned. I called her and she said my mother fired her the day before. I asked her to describe the woman and I was livid when I realized it was Sandra. She came into my house using her key and fired my nanny. I was about to call her when she showed up and said a convoluted story like how I hired an incompetent nanny, etc., etc. I told her to leave, but she refused and told me she's calling CPS because I'm endangering my child. We argued back and forth before I called the police and she was charged with trespassing. I know my mother-in-law is grieving the loss of her daughter. I am too. But she crossed the line when she disregarded my wishes. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law are calling me ruthless, and I am now second-guessing myself. Am I the asshole?
Wow.
Nah. No. Poor grandma trying to do the right thing maybe, but you have to recognize when you're out of line. And I would flip shit if I found out my mother-in-law was trying to breastfeed my kid. There's just a line, and that's a line I can't get behind.
That's a line.
I literally just Googled it as we were kind of talking here, and I was like, can a 56-year-old woman even produce breast milk?
That's also my question. I know nothing about this. So
according to Women's Health Today, a woman who is postmenopausal can still produce milk as long as you have a functioning pituitary gland.
It's all about the prolactin. And so if you stimulate the nipples enough, it'll get the prolactin going. And yeah.
Story time about how my boyfriend broke up with me to marry my mother. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Yes, my boyfriend actually did marry my mom. A little backstory on him. He and I had been dating for 6 months. We decided we wanted to move in together, but neither of us had a job. So we ended up moving in with my mother. A little backstory on my mom. Her and I never got along when I was growing up. I mean, it would get to the point where we would throw hands. Every single week she had a new boyfriend. Most of the time her boyfriends would come live with us and she would pay for everything. She even asked me to get a job so that I could help support her and her boyfriend. I started working at a restaurant. And yeah, I helped her pay for bills. I would even buy her boyfriend his beer. When I got accepted into college, I decided I would move out. After that, I barely spoke to my mom. Fast forward to when my boyfriend and I move in with her. She would wear lingerie around the house and constantly flirt with my boyfriend. I had to tell her on several occasions to cover up and just leave him alone. But here's the thing, it never bothered my boyfriend. In fact, he would flirt back. I thought he was just joking. Until a few months passed and he breaks up with me. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my boyfriend broke up with me to marry my mother. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said in part 1, we moved into my mom's house and she was wearing lingerie all the time. And she would constantly flirt with my boyfriend. My boyfriend was having a really hard time finding a job, but luckily I found a job. So I started working as a personal assistant. The problem is that as a personal assistant, you have to be on call almost 24/7. So I was usually never home, and sometimes when I would get home, I'd have to go right back out. This allowed for my mom and my boyfriend to spend a lot of time together by themselves. I would come home and they would be watching movies on the couch together. My mom would always cook him dinner, and then I started finding out stuff. For example, I found out they went to the movies together and they didn't invite me. I only found out because my boyfriend used our joint bank account to pay for the tickets. Sometimes they would order food for themselves and not even offer me any, and they would have beach days. They were spending way too much time together. At first I thought this was good because it meant they got along, but the more my mom dressed provocatively, the more I realized she was trying to seduce him. Then my boyfriend breaks up with me and tells me that I should move out because him and my mom fell in love. Part 3 of how my boyfriend broke up with me to marry my mother. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So one day my boyfriend breaks up with me and tells me that I should move out. And when I asked him why, he said that him and my mother fell in love. But since I was already suspecting something, it didn't really surprise me. But of course I was still devastated. That's when he asked me if I could move out that same night. Mind you, I don't have any money or even a place to go to. That's when I run over to my mom's room and guess what? She had locked herself inside. The coward didn't even want to face her own daughter. She told me that the best thing for everyone was for me to move out and that she knew I could get back up on my feet. So I grabbed some of my stuff and I went over to my best friend's house. My best friend invited me to live with her, thank God. A few weeks later, my mom invites me to her wedding with my boyfriend. Or ex, I should say. Last I heard, she's doing OnlyFans, and my ex is living off of her. I have a better job, I'm thriving, and have my own apartment. Story time about how I got bullied my last year of high school by the most popular girl. Okay, so this is my story time. A lot of you requested one, but I'm also at the airport, so sorry for any noise. So most of my high school years were spent in Nicaragua, except for my last year of high school. You see, I booked a show in Miami, so I had to move to the US. I was also doing modeling, commercials, and a lot of radio. I enrolled in the local high school, and it was like literally culture shock for me. I had never experienced an American high school, American parties, or even like actually mingled with American kids. I was really shocked to see how like adult they were. For example, boys and girls were doing adult things. I was constantly being invited to parties where people were drinking, but I never actually went. So the most popular girl in school decided to befriend me in quotation marks. By the way, there were so many times where I spent lunch in the bathroom like Caddy from Mean Girls. It was like Mean Girls, but real life. So this popular girl, she was also a model, and we kind of bonded over that. But behind my back, she had a bet to see which boy would take me to prom. She wanted to see how far this boy could get with me, if you know what I mean. Part 2 might not be up, sorry. Part 2 of how I got bullied by the most popular girl in school. This is my story time. So this popular girl who befriended me had a bet with boys to see which one would take me to prom. Specifically because she wanted to see how far they would get with me on prom night, if you know what I mean. I kept saying no to every single boy. Because I was the new girl, I was constantly getting hit on, but a lot of these boys had girlfriends. Well, since I said no to every single boy, this mean girl decided to print out flyers of the show that I was in. So basically the poster of the show. And when I got to school the next day, there were so many posters of me on the walls, on the floor, with a lot of things drawn on my face. They were even in the boys' locker room. Then someone made up the rumor that I did that because supposedly I wanted everyone to know that I was a working actress. I was really embarrassed, but at the same time, I kind of thought it was funny. And this really upset the popular girl. So she decided to take it a step further. She invited me to her house one day, and because I thought she was my friend, I decided to go. She cooked me pasta and we talked for a while. Then 2 boys show up. She told me one of them would be my prom date. Part 3 of how I got bullied by the most popular girl in school. This is my story, by the way. So I'm at the popular girl's house, and suddenly 2 boys show up, and she says one of them was my date. That's when I told her that I did not want to date for prom. And then the boy asked to speak to me. I talked to him and I told him that I definitely did not want to go on a date with him and that I didn't even know him. That's when he told me that my friend had set everything up, and she told him that I liked him a lot. Well, I told him that that was not true, and I basically went home. A few days later, she started a rumor saying that I was totally in love with her and that I forced her to kiss me. Yeah, she's crazy. That's when people started calling me horrible names. But the joke's on her because I was so used to getting bullied in Nicaragua. After school one day, she comes up to me and starts telling me why she doesn't like me. She was so angry she started to cry. She said that she was the pretty girl and that she was the model in school. I literally just walked walked away from her. I went to prom with no date, which was so fun. I graduated and then I kept working. Guess who slid into my DMs a few weeks ago asking to hang out? That's right, the popular girl. I think she must have seen my TikTok or something. Should I actually go out with her and tell her what I think? Or should I just leave her on red? You guys decide. Story time about how I cheated on my husband, lied about getting pregnant, and left with all his money. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Oh, this is gonna be a good one, you guys. A little background, my husband and I met 2 years ago. And lucky for me, he's a wealthy plastic surgeon. So a little backstory. I actually met him because I wanted to get a nose job. I made an appointment in his office and I went. We actually hit it off right away, even though he's older than me and, wasn't the best looking. After the appointment, I decided I would get the nose job. A few days later, I get a phone call. Guess who it is? It's the wealthy plastic surgeon who I just saw. He asked me out on a date and I said yes, of course. By the way, at the time I was a sugar baby, so I had a few sugar daddies. I figured he would just become another sugar daddy. He took me out to the best restaurant in town, and you better believe I ordered the most expensive thing on the menu. After my surgery, he would bring me food and was just really nice. Then he asked me to be his girlfriend and I decided to give him a chance. I even broke up with 2 sugar daddies to make space for him. That's when I asked my boyfriend for an allowance. He said of course. There's so much more to the story. Part 2 is up. Part 2 about how I cheated on my husband, lied about being pregnant, oh yeah, and stole all of his money. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. This was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said in part 1, I had asked him for an allowance. Of course he said yes and offered me $3,000 a month. I accepted even though it was on the low end. By the way, I still had 1 sugar daddy at this time. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I was pretty obsessed with the Kardashians. My goal in life is to look like Kim K. So now that I had a plastic surgeon boyfriend, I decided to ask him what other surgeries he thinks I could do. I already had my nose job. Now I definitely wanted to do some other stuff on my body. But when I told him, he got really upset. He said I didn't need to change anything about me and that I needed to stop looking for attention from other men. That's when I told him that would be totally impossible and that I definitely was going to keep my other sugar daddy. He totally flips out because he didn't know I had a sugar daddy. Then he asked me if I was actually in love with him. I told him that love would grow eventually, but that I really did like him. Then he started playing hard to get, like he wanted me to apologize and beg him, but I was not the type. So we ended up not speaking for a few weeks. Eventually he comes over to my apartment and asks me what surgeries I want to get done. And back to the surgery table I went. Part 3 is up. Part 3 about how I cheated on my husband, lied about being pregnant, oh yeah, and stole all of his money. Well, almost all of it. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So my plastic surgeon boyfriend decides to do more plastic surgery on me. But this time, it was free. We decided to get my bum done. Again, during the healing process, he was a total angel and brought me food and took care of me. Yeah, he was also paying for all of my bills and my rent this time, even though I still had a sugar daddy. And he knew it. A few months passed and he asked me to go to Italy with him. Of course I said yes. We stayed at a beautiful place in Tuscany and then he asked me to marry him. He had planned out this whole romantic dinner and of course I had to say yes. But on one condition, that I let go of my last sugar daddy. So I told him I would, although I actually did not. So we started planning my dream wedding. We finally got married and I moved into his mansion. Then he told me that I had to get pregnant right away. His excuse is that he's in his 50s and he really wants to have kids. I said I wanted to have a baby too, but I kept taking the pill. I mean, I am just not ready to have kids or to ruin my beautiful body. This is when my other sugar daddy started getting really annoyed because I never spent time with him. It was really hard being torn between 2 men. Part 4 is up. Part 4 about how I cheated on my husband, lied about being pregnant, and stole all of his money. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said, my sugar daddy was starting to get really annoyed at me because I never spent enough time with him. That's when I broke it to him that I was actually married. He totally flipped out, called me a user, cut me off, and blocked me from everything. So that meant I was not getting money from this sugar daddy at all. It meant I was totally dependent on my husband. Remember I said my husband wanted me to get pregnant? Well, I kept taking the pill because I didn't want to get pregnant. But my husband would ask me every single day how that was going. And I was like, it's going. I even started lying, saying that I was going to go to the baby doctor just to get myself checked, and I really wouldn't. Instead, I would go have lunch and shop. Around this time, an old sugar daddy of mine contacted me, who I still had a crush on. He was like super good looking. He offered me some money and asked me if I wanted to go on a few dates, so of course I said yes. I accepted because I really wanted to just separate myself financially from my husband. I didn't want to be dependent on him all the time. So when my husband was at work, I would go out on dates with this new sugar daddy. The sugar daddy wanted me to go on a trip with him, and I had to say no. He got really upset and started asking questions. Of course, I didn't tell him that I was married, but he started getting really suspicious. He also started to catch feelings really quick. Like he always wanted to be with me. He would text me all the time. And that's when my husband finds a text message from the sugar daddy. I basically denied everything and I told him that I no longer had any sugar daddies, but my husband did not believe me. That's when he calls my sugar daddy from my phone and tells him to leave me alone. And the sugar daddy told him that only I could make that decision. So I basically had to cut off the sugar daddy right in front of my husband. My husband was like really angry at this time. So I was on my best behavior for the next few weeks. But after a few weeks, he was still really angry. So I realized I needed to start taking money out of the account that he gave me. So I started transferring money from his account to my account. And then from my account to another account at a different bank. And guess what? My husband did not notice one bit. He had several other accounts and investments and all this other stuff, so he never really noticed if anything went missing from that one account. After a few months, I had $50,000 in that bank account. I knew it wasn't enough, so I had to start taking more money out. And then a few months after that, I was at $120,000. I knew this was enough to get me a little house somewhere and just like basically live by myself. That's when I devised a whole plan. Would leave the country and buy myself a house. Even started looking for a real estate agent in other countries. But then the poo hit the fan. My husband found my pills and asked me if I was actually trying to get pregnant or not. Once again, I started lying and I told him that of course I wanted to have a baby with him. Then he insisted we go to the doctor together. That's when he found out that I had not gone to the doctor once. He told me that if I didn't want kids, we would have to get a divorce, so I told him that I didn't want kids. That's when I told him I wanted a divorce and that I only wanted half of his stuff. He started laughing in my face and left. I knew I had to act quick because it was a matter of time before he found out I stole all that money. The very next day, I booked a flight and left. He started blowing up my phone, asking me where I was, calling me. Then he started threatening me for taking all the money in the bank account and that he hired private investigators to find me. Now I'm considering going back to him, but I honestly don't know what to do. I got myself a cute little house and even found a new sugar daddy. But I know he's still looking for me. What should I do, you guys? I think I really messed up, you guys. Story time about how I'm hopelessly in love with my boss and I'm about to be a homewrecker, but help me! Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So I've been working for my boss for 3 months. He's in the tech world and he makes lots of money, and he hired me as a personal assistant. He's got a wife and 3 kids. They've been married for 15 years, and he's 18 years older than I am. One day my friend told me that this guy was looking for a personal assistant, and I applied for the job. I had my first interview, and right away I was super attracted to him, and I could tell that he was attracted to me. Like, you know, when you like someone and, you know, there's just a vibe between you guys. He then called me in for a second interview, and in this interview, we basically spoke about everything he would want me to do and what the job entailed. I mostly had to run his schedule and set up meetings for him with clients and different things like that. So it's not like I was getting him his laundry or running errands for him. A few days later, he calls me and tells me that I got the job. He offered me a lot of money, more than it was advertised at the beginning when I went for the interview. So I took the job. But here's the thing. From the time I did my first interview, I had not stopped thinking about this man. Like, I already had feelings for him before I even started working for him. So I decided to dress really cute for my first day, and he noticed. I mean, I was playing this man like a fiddle. My goal was to get him to fall for me. After the first week, he asked me to go to lunch with him to celebrate the fact that I had been doing a good job. Of course, I said yes. Went to this beautiful restaurant and had wine. We then went back to his office and I went home. Later on, he sends me a text message saying that he's so proud of me for doing such a good job. Fast forward a few weeks, I kept flirting, he kept flirting back. Finally, at the end of the month, we went to another lunch. This is when he opened up to me and told me that he was attracted to me. I told him I was attracted to him too. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I'm hopelessly in love with my boss and I'm about to be a homewrecker, so I need you guys' help. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After my first month of working there, he took me out to lunch and decided to tell me that he was attracted to me. So of course I confessed to him that I was attracted to him as well. I mean, duh, it was so obvious. At this point, I had done everything in my power to make him fall in love with me. I wore the cutest outfits, always did my hair and makeup. If I went to Starbucks, I would always get him a drink as well. And I would even bring him home-cooked meals sometimes. So in other words, I went out of my way to make him see that I am totally wifey material. And yes, I was always aware that he was married and had kids, but he didn't look happy with his wife. She never came to the office, and they never spent any time together. And according to him, she had an affair last year, and he's pretty sure that she's back with the guy that she was having an affair with. First, I didn't know whether to believe him or not, but then he showed me screenshots of messages that she had sent to this guy. That's when he asked me if I wanted to go have lunch again. Then he asked me to go to the movies, and we made out the entire time. So I'm sitting there making out with my boss. That's when he tells me that we have to keep this hush-hush, because if the company finds out, he will be in major trouble and so will I. But he's a high earner in the company, so he can't be messing around. This would ruin his life. Ever since the first kiss, he basically treats me like his work girlfriend. And every day for lunch, we go out to a restaurant just to get to know each other. It's the only time we have together. About a week ago, he asked me if I would be willing to marry him if he divorced his wife. I said yes right away, but honestly, I'm not sure if I want him to leave his wife for me. And his kids. I never thought of myself as a homewrecker. Well, because I said yes, he said that we should try to find a way to tell his wife. I mean, I don't even want to meet this woman. And he wants both of us to talk to her. I told him we should wait at least a few months before we do that. That's when he got me a new apartment. That way, when he leaves his wife, he's already got a place to stay. And of course, he wants to live with me right away. It's a luxury apartment and I love it. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I'm hopelessly in love with my boss and I'm about to be a homewrecker. So yes, I need your guys' help. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So now that he got me my new luxury apartment, which I'm totally in love with. By the way, I have a sauna in my shower. He wants us to plan out how we're going to tell his wife. Like I said in part 2, I don't know if I want him to leave his wife for me. I mean, I see a future with him, but do I really want him to leave his wife and his kids for me? He even wants to start planning the wedding. He wants to move in together right away, plan the wedding, and get married. He promises me that his kids will love me and that his wife won't have a problem because she's already having an affair with someone else. But I feel like that's just him being hopeful and it's really not going to be that easy. So I opened up to my family and I told them what's going on. My mom told me that as long as he leaves his wife and everything is good with the kids, then we should feel free to be together. But ultimately, she doesn't want me to be a homewrecker. I definitely feel like things are going way too fast. I mean, tomorrow we're gonna go taste a bunch of cakes at a really nice bakery. Oh yeah, and he even took me shopping for a wedding ring. He wants to buy me one that's $40,000. It's 3.2 carats. So unfortunately, now that I told my family, a few cousins found out what was happening. And one of my cousins reached out to my ex. She told him what was happening and he called me to ask me not to marry this guy. He says we can work on our relationship. But let me tell you, this ex was totally toxic. He would monitor everything I would do. He never let me have friends, and he didn't even allow me to have Instagram. Oh yeah, and he's kind of broke. I mean, I was the one paying for most of the stuff in the relationship, so I don't even know if I want to open that can of worms again. But part of me thinks he's right. Like, I shouldn't be rushing into this. But on the other hand, I found myself a wonderful man. He's so loving, caring, so generous, and he's actually super fun to be with too. I've never felt more secure in a relationship before, and I know that most women would love to be with him too. What do you guys think I should do?
Story time about how I sabotaged my best friend's relationship with her boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I met my best friend 3 years ago in school. Since then, we've been inseparable, we have each other's backs, and I love her to death. The only problem is that she has terrible taste in men. She started dating this new guy 6 months ago, and as soon as I met him, I did not like him whatsoever. We all went to dinner. I went with my boyfriend, and my best friend went with her boyfriend. Let's call my best friend's boyfriend Anthony. Anthony was super cocky and arrogant. During the dinner, he started pointing out how my best friend had gained weight. Let's call my best friend Anna. Every time he would say something about her weight, Anna would just laugh. It started pissing me off. Wouldn't it piss you off too? After dinner, I talked to Anna and I asked her if she was okay. She started to cry. She confessed to me that he was always bullying her and making fun of her extra weight. She also confessed that she thought he was seeing other girls. I tried to get her to break up with him that same night, but she said no. She said she loved him. So I made a fake Instagram profile and started DMing him from it. And guess what? Right away, he started DMing me back. Part 2 is up. So I started DMing my best friend's boyfriend on Instagram through the fake account. I knew he was going to fail the test. Right away, he started messaging me back, writing flirty texts, asking me what city I was in and what I was doing that night. Little did he know he was talking to his girlfriend's best friend. I asked him if he had a girlfriend and he replied no. So I told him we should go out that night. He said yes, and as soon as he sent over his phone number, I started screenshooting everything. I even emailed the screenshots to myself just in case. I run over to my best friend's house and I show her all the screenshots. She wasn't even that surprised because she suspected he was cheating already. She started to cry and I told her, you have to break up with him now. She calls him and tells him to come over, but he said he already has plans because he thinks he's going out with this girl on Instagram. She told him that she really needed to talk to him and that it was important. He said okay, but he could only come by for 5 minutes. When he finally got there, I hid in the bedroom and listened through the door. She confronted him with all the screenshots. Of course, he started denying everything, so I came out of the bathroom, come back for... He denied everything and said the screenshots were photoshopped. So I come out of the bathroom to confront him myself, and I tell him, you were texting me the whole time on Instagram thinking you were talking to someone else. He didn't have any response. He was caught. Then, like the narcissist that he is, he actually told my best friend that I had been chasing him for months. She turns to me and actually asks me if it's true. I said, of course not. Then I told her to grab his phone and check his Instagram. He must have more DMs. So she snatches his phone, runs to the bathroom, and locks herself inside. Anthony runs after her and starts trying to kick down the door. I called 911, of course. Then he turns to me and calls me the C word. I thought he was gonna hit me. My best friend opens the door and throws the phone in his face. It turns out he had been DMing 15 other girls that same day. He did break the door, so my best friend filed charges against him. At least he paid for the door. Story time about how I caught my husband cheating on me with the neighbor. My husband is a really rich guy. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I first met my husband when I was 20 years old and he was 10 years older than me. He was basically my sugar daddy. Once I graduated college, he asked me to work at his company. I did all of the marketing. But eventually we wanted to have kids, so we decided to move to a bigger house. We ended up moving to a really secluded neighborhood with lots of rich families. One of our neighbors owned a yoga studio. There was also a young couple living across the street from us and they were also business owners. It was the perfect situation until I noticed that my husband was paying less and less attention to me. Well, I didn't hesitate to ask him why. He denied it and said that I was making things up in my head. So I installed an app in his phone that would send all of his text messages and emails straight to my phone. And guess what I saw? Text messages between him and the neighbor who owned the yoga studio. She was 10 years older than my husband, so I never saw it coming. I started collecting all the evidence into folders, pictures, and text messages. I wanted to catch him in the act. So one day I said I was going to a spa for the entire day. Part 2 is I told my husband I was going to be at the spa all day long. I wanted to see if he was going to bring the neighbor around to cheat on me some more. When I got in the car to leave, I get a message that he sent to the neighbor. Like I said, I had planted an app in his phone, so I was receiving all the messages he was sending and receiving. And of course, he sends her a message saying, hey, my wife's going to be at the spa all day. We're free. And she replied, replies saying, "Perfect, I'll come over." My stomach dropped. I drove around for a bit and waited for her to get to my house. Then I see she sends him a message saying she's there. That was my cue to go back to my house to catch him in the act. I race back and enter the house super quietly. I go into the living room and don't see anything, so I assumed they were in our bedroom. I go up to the bedroom and no one's there. And I see they're in the backyard in the pool. I pull out my phone and press record. I run downstairs and I surprise them in the act. They were both naked and my husband jumps out of the pool and wraps himself in a towel. Our neighbor stays in the pool. My husband says, "I was gonna tell you, I swear." It gets worse. Part 3 is up. I catch my husband doing dirty things in the pool with our neighbor. I'm recording all of this, by the way. He says he was gonna tell me. So I show him all the evidence that I had been gathering, all the messages and the pictures. But little did he know I had already hired a lawyer. I'd known about the affair for about a month at this point. I had already been working on the divorce with the lawyer, documenting every single transgression my husband committed against me with our neighbor. And when I told my husband, he freaked. The neighbor, aka the woman my husband was with, she got out of the pool and went home. I printed out some flyers with all the pictures she had sent my husband and spread them around her yoga studio. I now get $10,000 from my husband monthly. Story time about how I caught my girlfriend cheating on me with my cousin. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Girlfriend and I have been together for 5 months, and yes, we are both girls. My cousin, who is a guy, works as a club promoter. He's constantly surrounded by girls, so one night he invited me over to his club. When I got to the club that night, he introduced me to this girl. Let's call her Stacy. Stacy and I hit it off right away. She's an Instagram model and owns her own business. I was totally attracted to her right away. We talked and danced the entire night, and after that, we were inseparable. We did everything together, and she started sleeping at my place, and I would sleep at hers. And we started partying with my cousin every single weekend at the club he worked at. After a while, I told Stacy that I just didn't want to go to the club and that I wanted to stay home. But she said she was still gonna go. She started going to the club by herself, and after a few weeks I got suspicious. She was really distant and cold. So I did the logical thing. I followed her to the club one night without her knowing. And when I got there, I found her straddling my cousin on a couch, full on making out. It gets really scary and violent from here. Part 2 is up. I see my girlfriend straddling my cousin on a couch, full on making out. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Because we were inside of a club, there were so many bottles around me. I picked up a bottle and I threw it straight at her back. She turns around and looks at me and quickly gets up. My cousin stays sitting on the couch like the douche he is, and my girlfriend comes up to me, tries to play it off, and just starts laughing. But I was furious. Then she tries to kiss me. I push her and she falls onto the couch. She quickly gets up and tries to punch me in the face. Before I knew it, her and I were just beating each other up, and 4 people were trying to separate us. My cousin elbowed some guy by mistake while he was trying to separate us, and the guy started punching on him. It was like a ball of 10 people kicking and punching each other. The DJ stopped the music and the club lights were turned on. That's when I knew I had to get out of there before the cops were called. I mean, I did start the fight after all. I saw Stacy's phone on the couch and I quickly grabbed it. Stacy grabbed me by the hair again, and that's when I see the cops show up. Part 3 is up. That's when I see the cops come in and I just started running. Stacy ran right after me. People start shouting at the cops to grab us. I was taken outside and a cop put me inside his car. They did the same thing to Stacy. That's when I started crying because I was really sad at the situation because I really love Stacy. And I never expected my cousin to betray me like that. I apologized to the club manager and the cops and they let me go. When I got home, my cousin was waiting for me at my door. That's when he told me the truth. Stacy and him had been hooking up since before I met her, but she just never stopped hooking up with him. He apologized and left. A few days later, I see Stacy posting on Instagram about her new boyfriend. And it's my cousin. But don't worry, I got revenge. Stacy showed up at my apartment to apologize one night. We ended up getting entangled. Now the question is, should I tell my cousin or should I just continue to see Stacy behind his back? What do you guys... Story time about how I hooked up with my boyfriend's dad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend's dad is an absolute DILF. He used to be a competitive bodybuilder and even did some modeling back in the day. Well, let's just say my boyfriend didn't turn out with the same looks. Don't get me wrong, my boyfriend is really sweet, but he's not the best looking guy. One of the reasons we started dating and I really liked him was because of how considerate and loving he was. We started off as friends and he would take me out to dinner, wine and dine me, eventually asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes. We both come from wealthy families, and our families loved the idea of us being together. Exactly a year ago, we moved in together, and he got a new job that required him to travel a lot. Well, he asked his dad to come check on me. So his dad would come over, we would watch movies, and just hang out. But one night we decided to do some drinking. I got super tipsy, and so did he. One thing led to another, and we ended up, And after that, we did it over and over. Of course, my boyfriend's dad felt super guilty, and so did I. I mean, he was cheating on his wife with me, and I was cheating on his son with him. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I hooked up with my boyfriend's dad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After my boyfriend's dad and I had hooked up a couple of times, of course, he felt really guilty, and so did I. We decided to end things cordially and never tell anyone about it. Fast forward to when my boyfriend comes home from his work trip. I had to pretend like nothing happened, but it was really hard because at this point I definitely caught feelings for my boyfriend's dad. I became really distant from my boyfriend and he started noticing. He also asked me one day if his dad came over to check up on me, which I said yes. After that, things were just not the same between my boyfriend and I. He would always ask me why I never touched him or kissed him, and I would just say that I felt bad or that I had my period. A month later, my boyfriend goes on another work trip. My boyfriend even invited me to come on the work trip, but I said no. Instead, as soon as he left, I called his dad and told him to come over. I told him I just wanted to talk, but really, His dad came over, we talked for about an hour, and then it happened again. It's like we just couldn't help ourselves. That's when he told me that he was catching feelings for me and that maybe even wanted to get a divorce. Part 3 is Part 3 of how I hooked up with my boyfriend's dad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend's dad tells me that he wants to get a divorce from his wife because he's catching feelings for me. He even suggested that we could move away to another town. And yes, at this point, I had totally fallen for him too. But at the same time, I still had a relationship with his son. But to be honest with you guys, I didn't have the guts to tell my boyfriend that I loved his dad. Since my boyfriend was still on the work trip, his dad would come over almost every single day. His wife, aka my mother-in-law, didn't even notice that she was coming over to my place. She thought he was at work and at the gym. We are now fully in love. My boyfriend came back from his work trip and of course, I was still distant. A few days later, he asked me what was wrong and I just don't know what to tell him. His dad told me to keep quiet for now because he wants to figure out what to do. I don't want to end a marriage and I know I don't want to break my boyfriend's heart. But at the same time, I am in love with his dad. I know you guys are going to think I'm a terrible person, but I genuinely need your advice. What do you guys think I should do? Should I be honest with my boyfriend? Part 4 about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. After my stepson and I got caught in his bedroom by his mother, aka my husband's ex-wife, they forbade us from talking to each other or even seeing each other. My stepson moved out of our house, and I literally haven't spoken to him in about a week and a half. Here's the thing, my husband didn't really react the way I thought he would. He was definitely angry about me hooking up with his son, but he wasn't really angry about me having an affair. But the night that he found out, he told me he was also having an affair, and that it was one of his employees. Basically the same way his relationship and mine started. If you haven't seen part 1, you should go see it. In part
part 1, I tell you that he cheated on his wife with me. In other words, my husband definitely has an MO. A few days later, my husband grabs my purse from me and cuts up all my credit cards. He even took my name off of our shared bank account. So even though I live in this beautiful mansion with lots of fancy cars, I don't have any money of my own. Then he told me that it was his ex-wife's idea to take all the money away from me. I guess she must think I'm a gold digger. I convinced my husband to give me an allowance. I mean, I still have to do my nails. But things get complicated again. My stepson DM me on Instagram, part 5 is up. Part 6 of how I got caught hooking up with my stepson again. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram, not my story time. So hubby comes in and finds his stepson and I sitting on the couch. That's when my stepson, I have to stop calling him my stepson, more like my boyfriend now. He confronts his dad and tells him that we are in love. He even told him that we want to get married and move in together. That's when hubby accuses me of brainwashing his son into having an affair with me. Then he accused me of brainwashing him too into having an affair with him. That's when the doorbell rings. Yep, it's my husband's ex-wife and my stepson's mom. She starts calling me a homewrecker, saying that I took her husband away and now I'm taking her son away. Trust me, I understand where this woman is coming from. My stepson explained everything to her, and the fight went on for about 3 hours. Oh yeah, remember I told you guys I took a pregnancy test that was false? Well, I started feeling sick the other day, so I went and got another pregnancy test, and that one came out positive. My stepson and I went to the doctor, and it's confirmed I am pregnant. My husband finally agreed to give me the divorce, and he also gave my stepson his trust fund. So now we have a lot of money, and we're looking for our own house together. I guess everything has turned out pretty good, but I've been banned from every family event in the future. Should I do a part 7, you guys? Thank you for listening to my story.